who champions who champions the enlargement of the European Union, NATO, and accession of Ukraine and other Eastern European states to European Union, NATO.
Yes,
Strengthening
especially
ties
Ukraine
between,
in NATO.
strengthening ties between Kiev and Brussels. So, Mr. Fattinger, the floor is yours. So you have 1 hour lecture, and also you can accept questions from students. So we will be very happy to give a reply for your questions. So thank you very much, and have a nice lecture.
Thanks a lot. I'm very happy, Mikhailo, my friend, that you invite me. I'm Günther from Austria. I greet Odessa and Ukraine. I hope for victory, for liberation, and for integration of Ukraine in NATO and the European Union, and it will come. Budmo, I'm sure we will win together, and we are in this together, and I'm very happy that I'm invited. When you have any questions, always interrupt me, ask me something. I'm very happy to make a dialogue as well. I've prepared a small presentation. I can try to share the screen. One moment. Here, I think that could be it. Can you confirm that you see it? That would be good. You see the presentation?
Yes, it's okay.
Very good. You see, I'm part of this series which Mikhailo has organized. I'm very happy. I'm an Austrian economist. I will talk about the European Union, about NATO, about the Euro, about the economic system of the European Union, where I want to invite you, and I'm sure you will join. It's wonderful in the European Union. And I will also talk about the road to victory for Ukraine, what the European Union, NATO must do to support your victory and your liberation, how we can achieve that together in 2024. And please, always, when you have a question, just ask something, interrupt me. I want to make a dialogue. I will ask you some questions as well. If you can then also jump in with some answers from time to time. I hope that's interactive and that's interesting. You're fine with that format? Very good. Bravo, Odessa. Yes, you are now EU candidate since 1 year, and this is a historic achievement. Me personally, I follow the Ukrainian situation since 25 years, and you know, this has seemed impossible to be EU candidate for Ukraine until basically it happened 2022. So that's a historic achievement. Who can tell me how many members the European Union has today? Anybody? How many members we have? You can just jump in with some answers if you want. And how many members will the European Union have in the future? With Ukraine included? Any guesses? So it's 27 members we have.
I have a guess.
Yes?
27 members, yes, and with Ukraine and future members, there is 29 with Georgia.
And 29 is good. It's 3 ones. So you mean Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine, 29? It's 30
yes.
then. And who else wants to join the European Union? So I'm campaigning for 37 members. Yeah, we will be 37 members. If you look at my map, I have it here, and my campaign material on the website. You see that you know, we are 27 members now. Ukraine 28, Moldova 29, Georgia 30, and then we have, of course, Bosnia 31. We have Serbia 32. We have Montenegro 33. We have Kosovo 34. We have Albania, where I'm at the moment, 35. We have then Macedonia, North Macedonia, 36. And I hope as well that the United Kingdom will return, because you have seen it's such an important country, it should also return. So we will be ultimately 37 as fast as possible. Who thinks that's an easy process? To change from 27 to 37? You can compare it with the United States of America. In the 19th century, it was having in the beginning only 13 colonies, and then there was about 20 member states. and now they have 50. And it was a very difficult process. So it's also for us not so easy. And I think we can achieve it. But we need, of course, Ukraine not just to win the war, but also to be a very active pro-European country. And that's very important, because a union changing from 27 to 37 is not so easy process. But it's the only way for peace. And I congratulate Ukraine that they have the opportunity to join. It's much better living standards in the European Union than outside, and it will be a bright future of freedom. Who knows the four freedom of the European Union? Please. What are the famous four freedoms which everybody enjoys in the European Union? Anybody wants to give a guess? The freedom of capital, the freedom of free movement, of services, of people. That are the free movements, yeah. Good. Here are the countries. I had campaigned for these 9 new countries, and they are very important. So it's not only about Ukraine, or Ukraine is the biggest and most important country, but I'm campaigning for all these countries, and that's very important to understand. So what we need, accelerated membership. Here I have this beautiful picture of the various summits of all the European leaders. It's quite a lot of them. We are quite a lot of people, and with 37, we will, who knows how many people are already living in the European Union? It's about 450 million, and we have about 66 million waiting for us in the 9 new countries. So it's about, we will be 520 million people together with Ukraine and the new countries. So it's quite a substantial numbers. But it's not only about the EU itself. Yeah? What we also see, we must enlarge the European Union, but also NATO. That's actually my main campaign at the moment, because I've been quite successful with campaigning for Ukraine in the EU, that we have achieved. And now it's important to campaign for the NATO enlargement, because understand, please, NATO and the EU are like twin brothers or sisters. We are like one unit. There's not a big division between us, because both institutions were created at the beginning of the Cold War by the Americans to organize free Europe against the Soviet assault. Yeah? Because the Soviet Union wanted to take over all of free Europe after World War II. The Americans have stopped that. And as a response to the Korean War in 1950, the European Union and NATO was then created in these years, in 49 and in 50. And this is very important to understand. We are not just, you know, often you hear the peace project. Of course, we keep the peace, yeah, because we had not any war inside the European Union and NATO for now 75 years. But we are basically born by a military aggression of the Soviet Union against Korea, against South Korea. And that was the reason the European Union was formed. And then we have developed over the years. We have expanded after the end of the Cold War, and we are basically born under the fire of the Soviet Union aggression. And we are now getting to be much more united because of the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, and where we stand in solidarity with Ukraine, and we will absolutely support it. How many members does NATO have? Any guesses? How many members does NATO have at the moment? It's 31, and it's Sweden coming in, so it's 32. And how many members, how many new countries want to join NATO? Who wants to join NATO? Ukraine, you want to join NATO? I hope so. At least the opinion polls have said, even when I don't get a clear answer now. But at least I'm very much in favor of Ukraine joining NATO, and Austria and Bosnia and Kosovo and Malta and Moldova. Basically, everybody should be in the NATO association and alliance, because we are the only way to keep peace. If we had integrated Ukraine in 2017, 18 already in NATO, the whole terrible war would have never happened, because Russia will be never daring to attack NATO, because we are so strong and we are basically unbeatable and untouchable. And it was a tragic mistake not to integrate Ukraine into NATO when we could, and we could have done that easily. in 2017-18. Poroshenko tried it very much, and also Zelensky and now then we lost, of course, because of appeasement, this opportunity. And now we pay so terrible the price in blood and treasure because of this terrible aggression. And that's, of course, extremely sad that the Western policymakers have not been able to agree on NATO enlargement. But we have, as a response to the war, we have Finland and Sweden now in NATO. Finland already fully. Sweden, there is only Hungary missing, but it will come also in Washington. There will be membership, and that's very good. And what exactly needs to be done now from the side of Ukraine? I have made here a list of 18 points which Ukraine has to do. It's a clear message towards unity, membership in the European Union in 2029. Of course, also Ukraine must join NATO and have a very clear fast-track path into the European Union. 2029 is very much doable because Ukraine is already progressing since 2014. That was the moment of Western integration, the moment like 89 in Poland, 15 years plus. This is what it takes to join the European Union. So that's the way. There are some things I'm always recommending for Ukraine to do, but unfortunately your politicians don't listen. But okay, that's another thing. I have made already many articles and contributions to the debate about a Euro pack, like Bulgaria, to adopt the Euro, to faster integrate, to open the borders, to show that you really want to join the European Union, also by giving the freedoms of the European Union to all European Union citizens inside Ukraine. I have called for the customs union. I have called for unilaterally opening of the Ukrainian EU borders, for the disinstallation of the border facilities at the Polish-Ukrainian border. And I could be so sad, actually, that after me calling since 2016, when I moved to Ukraine, so intensively for all these things, and I've written open letters and I have contributed to the debate enormously. But still, you know, when we have the war now, tragically, since 2022, there is still a big mess at the borders, huge delays at the Ukrainian-Polish border, at the Romanian-Polish borders, refugees, good military supply, everything is stuck at these borders, and they are not necessary. We could have overcome these borders and opened them already in 2018. It's another tragic mistake of the authorities of the European Union and of Ukraine that this was not done, and I'm calling again and again for exactly doing that. Ukraine must be in the EU customs union, must use the euro as currency, must open the labor market, join the internal market. The EU must, of course, fund much more for Ukraine. There's no doubt about it. And also fund much more of the Ukrainian infrastructure interconnectivity with the European Union, and so on and so on. Many of the important things, open borders between Ukraine and the yes, I hear something. Okay. Was it a question? I'm ready to interrupt. Very good. If not, then of course we have here, this is my plan for European Ukraine already from 2017. I published it the first time, and all my activities are online. You can see it. You know, we have, of course, lost valuable time with the hesitation, with appeasement, with the problematic attitude of the European Union leaders against Ukraine's EU ambitions. And we could have been much further already if we had acted decisively after the Euromaidan revolution. But it was not to be. We hope that Russia will be peacefully and there will be no escalation of the war. But as we all know, it was absolutely an illusion. Russia was planning this war already for years, and then they finally decided to act and to aggress and to invade Ukraine in 2022. It could have been avoided. I think this is some other interference. Yeah. Here's about the euro. This is, of course, me as an economist, I'm very much focused on the economic integration of Ukraine and of Europe, obviously. It's very important to have the euro. This is an important tool in the economic integration mechanism. I was very critical when I lived in Ukraine. There was almost no euro, as it wouldn't exist. Yeah? It's our common currency. And of course, Poland should adopt the euro, Hungary adopt the euro. we're a little bit stuck in this integration, and we have only one recent success with Croatia joining the Eurozone, and hopefully Bulgaria will come next year. But unfortunately, we had a lot of resistance from the Polish, from the Hungarians, from the Romanians, and of course, this is a big mistake. Yeah? The more we are united, the worse it is for Russia. We are stronger and richer by more unity, and this is what needs to happen. And also for Ukraine, you know, this whole thing with the dollar, nice, yeah. Now in the war, they have then pegged again to the dollar, the Ukrainian hryvnia. And the Ukrainian hryvnia has gone through devaluation in 2014, in 2015, now in 2022 again. And it's a constant mess. So I call for stable politics in the currency sector, a peg to the euro, and it's best what we have done in Montenegro and in Kosovo after the Balkan Wars in 2002. We have allowed these countries to adopt the euro as currency, and this is by far the best policy for Ukraine as well, because simply to euroize, it would have been much better. Imagine, there are 5 million Ukrainians living now since 2 years, and I think it was more in the beginning, in the European Union, and it would have been much better if they had the euro. Many of them couldn't use their hryvnia accounts. There was a lot of improvisation, poverty, and misery because of having different currencies, yeah? Whenever people had assets and had wealth and had bank accounts and had savings, they couldn't use it then in Poland and in Austria. And this could have all been avoided if we were a little bit smarter. And still today, the central bank doesn't want to change towards the euro, doesn't want to back to the euro. I think, you know, from time to time, I'm really a bit desperate what more I can say in order to convince that the future is Europe. The future is Europe. And I was so happy when I was in Frankfurt campaigning about Ukraine. Some Ukrainian activists have put in the Frankfurt directly next to the central bank, to the monument of the euro. This is Ukraine, tomorrow in euro, and morgen in Europa and in the euro. Somebody had the same idea. I was very happy to see that, and this is exactly what must happen. Yes, talking about the European Union. What is actually the European Union? Economic integration goes in various stages, from the trade integration to the customs integration to the monetary integration towards the political integration as political union. In a way, the United States of America is the perfect model for that. We have achieved a lot. We are still not as united as we could be politically and in currency. But in the core of the fact, the European Union is an international trade integration system notified to the World Trade Organization. And this map, which I've seen here, shown here, this is the EU trade agreement maps of 2023. And this is very important because Ukraine is still not as integrated, obviously, as even Turkey is, yeah? Because Turkey is member of the customs union. You are only on the 3rd level together with the Balkans. And it's really much more important that Ukraine is integrating much more. It's also a wider point which is important because a breakdown of the relations with Russia is needing that the West, the European Union is opening its trade agreements with the Americas. The Mercosur agreement is very important. And also, of course, the free trade agreement with the United States of America between the European Union. And that will be very beneficial, both of them, also for Ukraine, because you are basically now part of our trading system after the decision of the DCFTA. And this gives you access via the European agreements to all the agreements in the world we have already. And this is very important. And this is, I think, wonderful. But unfortunately, there is some green and left-wing and right-wing agitation against free trade agreements in the European Union. So we have not ratified Mercosur, and we have not really concluded the American agreement. This is very important, and I hope that Ukraine, as a member of the European Union, will be also open to the world, will be not going into a Kaczynski protectionist Polish direction, but will be a very good contribution to the European debate, like I would compare it with the direction Poland is now taking under Prime Minister Tusk. This is my hope, that you will be an active participant of the European Union, also in these important debates about trade. Yes, is the European Union working? I have here this table about the growth in the last 20 years. Romania has grown no less than 8 times better in the last 20 years. 8 times. Bulgaria, 7 times. Yeah. Poland, 3 times. Yeah? Absolutely. We have taken about 100 million people in the European Union since the last 20 years from Eastern Europe. This is a historic achievement, and we have really contributed very much with the European unification. We have failed Ukraine. That is, of course, in the battle with Russia, which is basically ongoing since 1999, since the Chernobyl. We could have, of course, changed the world, the opposition leader, but he died in this tragic accident. And then Ukraine was basically, with the rise of Putin, again under the Russian influence from 1999 onwards. And so you were not participating in the enormous rise of the Eastern European economies inside the European Union due to our fault, to the Russian faults, also to the Ukrainian faults. It's a tragedy, but you can see if you are in the European Union, if you do the same like Poland, like Romania, if you join, you will be very successful and the future is bright. When it comes, I have here also two statistics to understand a little bit, because I think in the debate, it's always misunderstood. The world has now 8 billion people, and the world has now 100 trillion GDP, and Russia has exactly 140 million people and exactly 1.5 trillion. So Russia is a very minor part of the global economy. Russia is basically 1.5% of the global economy. And we in the West, together with Ukraine, of course, and of course, America and NATO partners, we are about half the global economy, and we are a very important part of the global output. So basically, Russia can never win against us. We are much bigger, stronger, and technology-wise advanced, fiscally much more capable. So Russia had from the beginning no chance. They are just more brutal. That's the only advantage they have. And ultimately, they will have a very big defeat in Ukraine because of the heroes of Ukraine and because of our basically unlimited fiscal capacity, our technology advantage. And you will see we will definitely win in this war. Good. And then we come to these important points about the energy sector. I'm calling since the beginning of the war for the end of all energy imports from Russia. We have achieved in Germany big success. Germany has been very dependent on Russian energy. It's now basically down to zero in coal and oil and in gas. This is a historic achievement. And we will gradually, with the help of Ukraine, cut out all Russian energy imports by the end of 2024, also in the field of gas. And thanks a lot. This is, of course, very important. And it's very, very key to defund the Russian war machine. Here comes the infrastructure interconnectivity. I always say that we should have done that already 10 years ago, but now at least we are starting to connect Ukraine physically much better with our energy system that has worked, with our rail system. That's, of course, very expensive, but we should be doing it as well with our highway system, including the joint border checkpoints. Here, the decisions have been made, implementation very slow. And you see, it would have been easy from 16 onwards to 22 to really do all this infrastructure interconnectivity already. And I made many open letters and statements. Now we had the Russian blockade in the Black Sea, and it was 1 year a real and major economic damage, especially for Odessa. And now the western part of the Black Sea is liberated by the Ukrainian Navy and Army and the storm shadows. That's a big success. I'm always calling again and again, we must destroy all the Russian Black Sea fleet. They have no right to be there. They have started this war. They must be defeated. The Russian Black Sea fleet must be sunk. But nevertheless, we are also to blame because all this infrastructure we could have already done, at least a lot of things at the border, the highway crossings, and now we are only in the stadium of announcing all these things. And that's very regrettable. And we, of course, are here and we also need to fund Ukraine more. What's happening is, of course, a big problem in terms of the lack of funding. And we need to fund Ukraine much more, especially when it comes to the European Union. We have now made the decision for 50 million of a package. That's very good. You know, there's nothing bad. It was complicated enough. 50 billion is about, Ukraine needs about 5 billion a month. So that's about enough for 1 year. So, and we have done it for 4 years. In reality, we need to have a much better funding for Ukraine. We need also to replace the American funding if they are not available to do it. And so we need really a much better performance I have estimated the whole war will cost about 2,000 trillion to the European Union economy in terms of reintegration, reconstruction, about the infrastructure interconnectivity, the funding for the war, the rearmament of Europe, and all the necessities to soften the economic impact of the economic war by Russia against us. So that's much more realistic number than the 50 billion. But nevertheless, we have given Ukraine already 138 billions in the last 2 years, and 50 billion will be additionally coming. So it's also considerable money which is coming from the European Union. And you know that we pay, it's basically the price for the appeasement. I have made it here in my slide. I hope this yellow, this red, but that's the alarm signal I wanted to use, because the visits of Macron and Scholz in Russia in February 2022 have basically green-lighted the invasion. This is the new Chamberlain moment of Russia, of Europe, going there, claiming there will be no war. And then Russia has already prepared the attack and is striking just days after these visits. Yeah. And I and many of me who have the similar political conviction, we have warned all the time that this will happen. And it came, and it is really a very big disappointment that we were not able to change that and stop that. Yes, I'm calling in all my social media tweets and activities for the 16th March to be the European Commemoration Day for Mariupol. As a genocide, we will, once we have liberated Mariupol, we will definitely see the immensity of the crimes of Russia, especially in the southeast of Russia with Mariupol, the hardest hit city. I was visiting Mariupol in February 2022, on the 10th of February, to warn that this will come, because everybody who is in this debate since years knew already that Mariupol will be attacked. There was no surprise in the revenge Putin wanted to do against Mariupol, because that city has resisted his invasion plans in May 2014. And then he took revenge in March 2022 by killing tens of thousands of people have died in Mariupol. And I know that Bucha is now more famous symbol of the Russian genocide, but in reality, once we have liberated Mariupol, we will find out that this is the place where historic levels of genocide against the Ukrainian population have been committed, and that's why the 16th of March should be always live in infamy as the day where the Mariupol theater was bombed and so many people died. Now I come to the day-to-day demands which I'm making towards the public on my social media feeds and in the Austrian public as well. This is, of course, we need the airplanes. It's unbelievable that Ukraine doesn't have the airplanes for the counter-offensive 2023. And, you know, that is a big, big mistake, a historic mistake of the West. We didn't give the airplane cover, and this is really a tragedy and an enormous sign of weakness of the present American leadership. And this is really unforgivable. And I'm really apologizing seriously to the Ukrainians that we didn't do that. I'm an Austrian. I come from a neutral country. I will now talk a bit about Austrian policy as well. I call that also the Ukrainians should not accept Austrian neutrality. I know some of you might not be very familiar with the Austrian position, but we are one of the few countries which has not given any weapons to Ukraine. And I go to all the meetings. I protest with my NATO flag, with my Ukrainian flag. And I always call, we need to give the tanks. We need to give the military support. Everybody in Europe must do that. Everybody in the free world must support Ukraine, because our position is completely immoral. And please, if you know any Austrian, protest against neutrality and ask them for their support, because just to send some blankets and have some refugees is really not enough in this historic war which we are at the moment. I come to what Russia has done in Austria, because as an Austrian, I'm very much focused on my own country here. And our policy the last 22 years towards Putin was, from the beginning, he was very welcomed and his money was very welcomed. Some of you might know that Mr. Firtash is still living in Austria unmolested whenever the Americans wanted to have him. We have protected him because Russia is the biggest investor. And historically, Austria was the first gateway for Russian energy for Western Europe. So from 1968 on, these Russian gas pipelines from Siberia have ended in Vienna, close to Vienna. And then this gas was distributed towards Germany, Italy, and other countries. And then all this money was converted into dollars in Vienna. And there was the center of Russian money laundering. And still today, we see a lot of the Austrian politicians running for Putin, helping Putin, meeting Putin. The Austrian chancellor was the only foreign politician from a Western country which has met Putin since the war, to my best knowledge. He went in April last year there. And we have all these famous, some of the photos I'm sure you know from the media as well. Most infamous and notorious was, of course, the dancing event of our foreign minister from the Nationalistic Party. But there are many other events, and Putin was received in Vienna in 2014 and in 2018, and it's really a big shame, and I'm apologizing for Austria to you. Yes, I've published for Austria not to trade with the enemy. I'm calling for a full boycott of Russia in terms of trade, and this is the best policy, and we have not done it. We have now 12 sanction packages, but the most of important sectors like gas, like nuclear, we have not really sanctioned, and this is a real major issue because we are still buying a lot of Russian energy during the war. Austria has now reached again pre-war levels of consumption and import of Russian energy. And of course, these 7 billions are funding the Russian budget, and then they are funding the Russian war machine, and they are funding to kill Ukrainians. And this is totally unacceptable for me. And I call for the European Union to do a complete boycott of Russia, to end the trade with the enemy, and then to isolate Russia in all activities, because it's a genocidal terrorist regime which must be completely isolated and stopped. Yes, I have here a list of things which Austria needs to do, and according to my recommendations, break this contract with Gazprom, sanction Russia fully, and withdraw the Austrian FDI from Russia. Most famously, for example, recently, when Ukraine needed the Austrian consent for the EU candidate status and the opening of the negotiation, Austrian state has blackmailed Ukraine to de-sanction the Raiffeisen Bank Ukraine, because they were sanctioned because of the huge activities of Raiffeisen Bank in Russia still today. And that's, of course, completely unacceptable. So we should really end all Austrian FDI in Russia, and we should also then support more the reconstruction of Ukraine with this money. We should extradite Firtash to the USA, and we should clean up all this Russian and pre- and 2004 mess, because a lot of the Russian oligarchs under Yanukovych time, they have laundered the money in Vienna, and that's completely unacceptable. And of course, Austria should join NATO, so we can supply tanks and ammunitions towards Ukraine, which we should. Yeah, that's of course my campaign. I started already in 2016 to activate myself. Austria and Ukraine have a long history. Ukraine wanted to be independent several times in the 20th century, and it would have been much better to have independent Ukraine. And also our common roots, because a lot of 15% of Ukraine was part of the Austrian Empire until the First World War. We should somehow know our past better in order to support the Ukrainian integration in the European Union and in NATO much more. Yes, about Austria, obviously, our history is also very much connected. The Ukrainian front of the Soviet Union was liberating Austria in 1945. But of course, then the Soviet Union was occupying the east of Austria and Vienna. And then they only went away and left to the Czechoslovak Republic once Austria declared its neutrality. And we were not allowed to join the European Union because of the Soviet Union veto. And only when the Soviet Union disappeared, Austria could join the European Union in 1995. 95, yeah. And then we were not ready to join NATO afterwards because of this inherited self-declared neutrality which the Soviet Union has imposed on us. And this is what I would like to overcome. And please, all Ukrainians, support Austria joining NATO. Yes, why? We, of course, need battle tanks. We have not as many as the Germans, but we have at least 55 tanks, and they will be extremely useful for Ukraine now. So I'm calling for the Ukrainians to call the Austrians, send the tanks, stop this neutrality. We need more tanks, and we have 55 at least. We can give them all. We can buy new tanks because we are a rich country, and this is what more European countries should do. I'm calling, of course, and the Germans to send the Taurus missile. This is the most famous and strongest missile which we have in the European arsenal. And this especially is very important to destroy the illegal Kerch bridge, which is an illegal construction. And it's very important to destroy this bridge now. Best it is February, before March 16, before the elections. But unfortunately, the German MPs don't want to do that. Sorry. And that's, of course, very unfortunate. And I'm calling for this rocket. I have published articles in the German media to call for this rocket to end the logistic supply lines towards Russia for Crimea, because I'm actually quite optimistic, contrary to many analysts. I think that Ukraine can win this war. At least the liberation of Crimea is very, very possible now. It is not just we need to give the tools. With the Taurus and with the airplanes, Crimea can be liberated very soon, and that's what I'm calling for and what I'm hoping. We need to get Crimea back. It's Ukrainian, and it will be NATO and the European Union, and this is what we can achieve with these rockets. Yes, here in conclusion, I call again for the opening of the borders between Ukraine and Poland, Ukraine and Romania. There is no need for these borders. It's very harmful for the people. It is hindering our military victory. It is hindering the economic integration of Ukraine in the European Union, and these borders must be immediately and permanently lifted. I call for Ukraine to adopt the euro as a currency, unilateral, like Kosovo, like Montenegro, even against the resistance of the European authorities. You must impose yourself on the European Union. You must as well declare that Ukraine is part of the European Customs Union immediately. You have to join all the bilateral and regional networking of the Southeastern European countries. These two institutions here I mentioned, CEFTA and the Regional Cooperation Council. This is very important to fast-track the integration into the European Union. Of course, you have to also open fully the land market for European investors as part of the free movements of the four freedoms. Land, capital, persons, services. This is and the goods, and this is very important principle, because you must be much faster. You have not the luxury to wait 20 years for Europe. If you want, okay, that's your choice. But if you want to be in the 2029 in the European Union, then you need to be much more ambitious in the euroization of the currency, in the customs union of the European Union, in the opening of the internal market, in declaring Ukraine as part of the internal market in terms of the four freedoms unilaterally, and also declare the European law as the law of Ukraine. This is the way. And of course, to join NATO in 2024, I know the Americans and Germans don't want that, but you have a lot of allies in the Northern Europe and also in Eastern Europe, and this is you need to basically do, and you have to impose yourself by basically liberating Crimea. This will all change the momentum, and this is the way forward. And this is also one condition, because we will not take Ukraine in the European Union without having NATO on board and NATO membership, because we can, as EU, not take the full security risk and obligation for Ukraine's eastern border without the United States of America. That means without NATO membership of Ukraine, there is also no way for the European Union membership to really materialize. So it's all connected, and you must join both institutions, and you must be much more radical in imposing yourself on the EU, because there is no way to achieve that. And outside of NATO and EU, now I would like to be a little bit negative, and without the euro, there is no real future for Ukraine. EU integration, NATO integration, and the prosperity can only work inside EU, NATO, and the euro and the customs union. You cannot make a little bit EU, a little bit NATO, and not really customs union, not really euro, and think that you can repeat the success of Poland, Romania, or Slovakia, or the Estonia. No, you must really join everything at once, and much more radical than the present leadership is really ready to do. And this is the only way for success. If you continue to be a little bit inside, outside, not so much, not so fast, take it easy, that is the wrong approach, and it will not lead to success, and we need success. I want to now talk as well about my activities to dismantle Russia, which is also very important because the Ukraine success should also lead to changes in Russia. Because strategically for us in the European Union and in the NATO, after what we have seen with the attack of Russia against Ukraine, we cannot accept anymore to have a very dangerous and brutal and potentially, and in reality already active aggressor east of us. So we must have success in Ukraine in order to encourage the independence movements of Russia to repeat what happened in 1991. That is the disintegration of the Russian Empire. Because no matter what happens in now, how long the war still takes, you will never live in peace in Ukraine as long as a very big, dangerous neighbor is to the east. So that's why I have decided during the war now in January 2023 to be very active in the Forum of the Free Nations of Russia. And I actively encourage the independence of Chechnya, of Sakha, of Kaliningrad, of Tatarstan, of Ingushetia, and all the other places. You in Ukraine, of course, you know these places much better. I personally had to learn these countries' names because I didn't know the structure of Russia so well. I knew some for my visits in the 1990s. But nevertheless, I'm calling for the disintegration and the dismantling of Russia into 41 new states. And I'm very active in this activity and campaign. And maybe some of you follow me on Twitter. It would be very nice if you follow me on Twitter, actually, or if you follow me also on my YouTube page and my activities here in the free forum of the post-Russian, I call it ex-Russia, like the ex-Soviet Union. And we have to work together to achieve that. We have to encourage the disintegration of Russia as a result of the Ukraine victory, because it's the only way we can live in peace in Europe. And it's the only way for peace for Ukraine, because otherwise you have to be like a fortress, steeled in fire, constantly aware of a next Russian aggression for years and decades to come. So our aim must be to strategically support the separatist, secessionist regions of Russia, and then to have this integration is the only way. So this is my strategy. I very much believe in Ronald Reagan, and this is also the gentleman, the leader of America, which won the Cold War. And nobody believed in the 1980s when I was a young person at my school. I remember very well, nobody believed we can ever win against the mighty Soviet Union. We were in the shadow of the Soviet Union, and then he came, he was elected. He started the nuclear rearmament of Europe, of Western Europe. He started the defense shield and all these major initiatives to work against the Soviet Union. And ultimately, the Soviet Union disintegrated and dissolved herself in front of our eyes, not without wars. There was, of course, a lot of violence during the disintegration of the Soviet Union in Lithuania, in Azerbaijan, in Georgia. But at least, you know, the enemy was defeated and it was dissolved. And there was the hope that Ukraine will also fully join the West. But of course, the Russians have fought against it and took the power in Russia in 1999 with Putin again. And then they have not really let Ukraine integrate into the West. And we were a little bit reluctant, run by pieces, to encourage you after the Orange Revolution enough. And that was a big strategic mistake. We could have done much more for Ukraine in 2006 and 7 and 8. We didn't do that. My apologies as well. We could have done much more for Ukraine in 2015, 16, 17, 18, to 19, 20, 21. And then we had to pay the heavy price, the most heavy price you had to pay, and your brothers and fathers and all the heroes who had to fight, and many were killed against the Russian invasion. And it is a tragedy that it had to come so far. But we have learned, and we need to win this war. There is no way for compromise anymore. There is no way for any kind of settlement with Russia. We must win. We must liberate Ukraine together. We must provide you all the financial and military means to win this war and to liberate and to win completely. And that is basically what I would say. I think the freedom works and Putin kaput. I think many of you who speak the languages know what I mean with that. here is my final concluding slide, which I campaign on social media here, what Ukraine has to do with the customs union, with the EU, yes to Ukraine in NATO. And also here are my references and my YouTube channel, which I would kindly ask you to follow. And also please to share and to follow me on Twitter, where I do these activities day to day. And now I'm available for questions and for comments. Thanks a lot for listening. Slava Ukraine.
Героям слава.
You're very welcome. I will stop share. Very good. Any comments or any questions?
I have a question.
Thank you very much for the lecture. Yes, please speak.
Sorry. What advantages will a country have when joining the European Union?
Look, the country has many advantages because it's like a level in a federal system. You have a level above the nation state. Yeah? So countries work like this. You normally in Europe, you have a municipality, yeah, which is running the day-to-day affairs and managing the city level. Then you have a region. In your language, it's called the oblast, which has the regional responsibility. Then you have a national government. And above the national government, you have the European Union. That's very important because countries outside of the European Union, the politicians in a country without the EU are like the kings or the princes. Yeah, they control the life of all the people there with the right to tax and the right to regulate. Inside the European Union, we have developed a lot of regulations to make transparency, accuracy, and decency in regulation. And you have a level above the national politicians, which is very important for a better governance. And this is really what we have seen in all the Eastern European countries who were very corrupt and problematic and badly governed before they came to the European Union. And by time we had a major impact on Romania, Poland, Estonia. So that's very important for the states. They will be much better states. Yeah? The second one is for the economy, because the economy is much better inside a big economy. Because the problem in Europe, we have 42 states. Yeah. It's all very segmented with customs cutting. You know, everywhere you go, you have another border. That's very expensive and that's very complicated. And that's not good for business because in markets, in the economics works like this, the bigger the market, the better the prosperity for all. Yeah. So this is very important because by the European Union, you overcome all these borders inside Europe. So that will mean for the economy is very good. And it's also very good for the citizen, for the people like you, because you have the freedoms. The freedoms matter very much. You can travel where you want, you can work where you want, you can live where you want, you can invest where you want. This is very important. I understand you are now a student. That means that you can go to other places. When I was a young student like you in Austria, I was not in the European Union. I couldn't go to France or to Germany to study. Yeah? Now, when you will be member, you can go. And this is very important. And then when you later you want to work somewhere, you can go in other countries and work in the other countries, not as a refugee or as a temporary resident, as the Ukrainians can do now because of the war, but as a European citizen with the right to do that. This is, of course, much better. And this is important. And of course, for the investment and for the work I have already talked. So the European Union is about freedom and better governance, and freedom for the individual and better governance for the state translates in higher prosperity level, because Ukraine still is at about $3,500 GDP per capita, and this is by far the poorest in Europe, not only because of the war, but because you were outside. We left you outside, the Russians wanted to have you, you were the buffer state par excellence in the European history of the last 30 years, so you were having a very oligarchic system where only the rich got richer and most of the population was watching them driving Ferraris in Kiev. Yeah? This is a typical kind of oligarchic society because you don't have good governance of the European Union and you don't have the opportunity, but a few in the center control the natural resources. That means in the European Union, you have much more controls, much more competition, much more checks and balances, much more freedoms for the individual. And so you will get richer, not by tomorrow. You know, this is the tomorrow rich. It's only happening in countries like Russia. You find the oligarch, you go with him, you get rich. Yeah? In the European Union, you don't get rich by tomorrow. But in the next generation, you will be as rich as Poland. And in 2 generations, you will be as rich as Germany. And this is the way we can offer. And I've shown you the slide. It worked very well in Romania. It's now much richer than Russia, first time in the history. And it worked very well in Poland and in Estonia. Just travel there, go there, see how it works, and copy exactly what they did in Estonia, Poland, and Romania, and you will be very successful. And it makes a huge difference for you when you're now 22. When you will be 40, it will be already much better Ukraine. And when you will be 60, it will be like a European Union country. And that will be very, very big difference for generations of Ukrainians to come.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to express my sincere gratitude for you as a student at International Humanitarian University for this great opportunity indeed for us to participate in this fascinating lecture. Personally, I have heard a lot of overwhelming facts that I haven't known before. Yeah, obviously, yes. So thank you very much for this opportunity to take part in this lecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the compliment. You know, I have more respect for the people who come from Europe to fight for you and to contribute to the military resistance and victory. I have a lot of support as well and respect for the people who do so much in the humanitarian area. I'm just an economist and activist, so I can do my things on this information space. Yeah, but there's a lot of people who have deserved much more praise, much more respect because of their personal sacrifice and their enormous contribution to the Ukraine victory. And I know it's a difficult period for everybody, these 2 years, but the ultimate victory will come, and I will do at least my contribution for this. And thanks for everybody who contributes. Any other questions? If you have no other questions, I will say thank you very much for the invitation. All my slides are available on my website. I have the link on Twitter. My Twitter feed is Günther Fehlinger, my name, basically. There's a lot of negative feedback from Russia and from other fans, boys of Putin on my Twitter feed. So I warn you from the beginning, they hate me very much. I was recently also in the Russian TV as a psychopath who wants to dismantle Russia on some kind of shows with 8 analysts. Yeah, that was on some channels. It's also on YouTube. Yeah, so there's a lot of material about my theories, my proposals online. I'm very happy if you follow it, and if you like some of my things, and if you follow me on Twitter, it's a big support for me. And I wish for Odessa students to be successful in your life and the liberation. I know it's a very difficult moment, but the liberation will be complete and full, and you will be member of NATO and the European Union. It will take time, but it will definitely come, and it will be a much better future ahead for the Ukrainians inside EU and NATO. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Slava Ukraine.
Героям слава.
Героям слава.
Thank you. Bye.